This is Andrew Davey from Let's Talk Nevada, and we're here today with Rick Shepard, who is running for Congress in Nevada's District 2. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So, what compelled you to run for Congress?
I've been an activist for about a decade, and after years of seeing the failures of activism, I realized that the only way to fix the problem was to get in and fix it from within. So I stood on corners, I held signs, I went to rallies, I flew to New York City to occupy Wall Street, and while I was there, I spoke with veterans and homeless people and all kinds of individuals who were taken in by the cause, this need to make things better, but no one could really articulate what the problem was. Everyone hit on aspects of it, be it healthcare, be it wage disparities. There's so much to get worked up over that it's hard to wrap your mind around all of the various facets, and no one person had the total package at that point. We've since come around and we've really seen some whole package solutions presented by Bernie, and the ideas
Bernie Sanders, I see.
Exactly. And these establishment politicians will never capitulate. They're never going to do anything except what the will of their major donors demand. So,
and I take it you consider Congressman Mark Amedee to be part of that establishment?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. He's clearly financed by mining interests. He has towed the line with every Republican establishment policy, from denying 9/11 responders health care to telling women what they can do with their body, shutting down the government, which of course resulted in a downgrade of our creditworthiness, which makes us have to pay more for debt. So you can't present yourself as being fiscally responsible and at the same time deliberately cause yourself to have to pay a higher rate for your interest.
So how would you assess how Congressman Amedee has served constituents here in northern Nevada? I remember last year seeing Ralston post a notice for a fundraiser, and he noted there were a few local Democrats on that committee, and the assumption has always been, well, Congressman Amedee is set, this is his seat, and he delivers the bacon for northern Nevada.
I don't know that he delivers the bacon for northern Nevada. He delivers it for a few people in northern Nevada, but not for we the people. And his latest bend has been this taking the land back, trying to turn federal lands over to the state, which is a joke in itself, because he's not taking the land back, he's taking it. Right? In our state constitution, it says that it's the property of the federal government and always has been. That's another example of him just wanting to take something that doesn't belong to him, sell it off to his buddies, and turn what's left either into a wasteland or
and in the process endorsing Clive and Bundy's range war against the federal government.
Precisely. So there's plenty of issues there. And it's not to suggest that the Republicans by themselves are the problem. Establishment interests are on both sides of the aisle. And so long as we have money in politics, so long as we have that tremendous amount of influence, then these puppet politicians will just vote the will of their donors.
Well, let's get back to public lands for a moment.
Sure.
As this is an issue that's been rocking the state for at least the past 2.5 years. If you could have waved a magic wand and decided how best to deal with Bundy and his allies and these occasional, their occasional protests on public lands, how would you have dealt with it?
Well, I'm glad that it was more peaceful than I feared it might have turned. It does concern me that a group of well-armed white men receive so much gentle hand-holding, but a single black child with a BB gun gets gunned down in a second. So we have clearly institutional racism. These people presented themselves as being Christian, but if they had done the same fervent presentation of themselves as being Muslim, I don't think we would have seen the same level of caution and carefulness in this approach. So I'm glad that it's resolved. I'm glad that he finally is occupying the federal facility that he belongs in, but I'm not thrilled with the way it was handled, because I genuinely believe that if these had been people of minority or other religions, they would have been treated more harshly. And the word terrorism would have been thrown around.
Yeah, as we've been seeing lately. last year the Nevada legislature considered several bills pertaining to Bundy and public lands, ultimately passed a resolution essentially endorsing Bundy's position. And as you noted earlier, Congressman Amodei has supported efforts to transfer public lands to the state, and environmentalists have certainly been concerned that this is opening the door to privatizing public lands. Mm-hmm. So, what do you think the federal government needs to do differently in terms of managing public lands in Nevada, and would you support efforts to enhance protections for certain areas like, say, Gold Butte?
Absolutely. The federal government's been protecting this land for over 100 years. Mm-hmm. But we have issues like feral horses, invasive weeds, trails and parks that need to be managed. All of this takes money. And our state government does not have the money to take care of that on a long-term basis. So our only option were to come to the states, not back to the states, but to the states, is to either sell off chunks of it to the highest bidder to take care of the remainder, which is a race to the bottom I'm not interested in entertaining, or we leave it and ignore it and we let it go. And that's also not something I'm willing to entertain. And the federal government has been handling these properties for all these many years, and I suggest it stay where it is. Mm-hmm. We can increase funding, we can certainly do more, there's always more that can be done, but the idea of taking it to the state level is a failure. We've seen it with the EPA when they turned over controls to local authorities, and then what do we have? We have Flint, Michigan. We have water problems. So as soon as the control comes to the state, it's the beginning of the end for public services.
So would you endorse what it looks like Senator Harry Reid is pushing for in terms of gaining national monument status for Gold Butte, and what's already been done in terms of enhancing protection for Basin Range?
Yeah, again, as long as it's done at a federal level, then I'm on board with the idea. It's at least worth considering. Yeah. Anything that doesn't turn it back over to the state, or turn it to the state rather, see here, it's a polluting idea. You start to incorporate that word back even when you're trying to avoid it.
Mm-hmm. Now, getting back to this whole issue of the establishment and establishment politics, we've seen that term bandied around a lot in recent weeks and months. I notice you have several opponents in the Democratic primary. Would you also consider some of them as establishment? How would you say you stand out in the Democratic field?
The other two guys that are running on the Democratic ticket are perfectly good people. I've interacted with them. I'm fond of them as human beings. Yeah. They're good people. Either one of them would be a marked improvement over Mark Amodei. Yeah. So really it's differences with respect to policies and interests. Vance Alm is very interested in the healthcare side of things, as am I. I'm more interested in the climate change aspect as my primary objective. But not to say that either is necessarily better or worse than the other. It's just that's the thing that we're pushing for. Chip has been around for many years and involved in many local politics, so he's clearly got the ear of people who know what's going on, and that has value as well. Mm-hmm. So there's plenty to be offered from any of us, but of course if I thought that either one of them was a better choice, I'd back them instead of run myself.
Mm-hmm. And since you mentioned climate change, that's also something that's been in the news lately. We've seen a lot of uproar in recent weeks, north and south, over the Public Utilities Commission decision on net metering. What if anything would you like to accomplish in Congress in terms of encouraging more development of renewable energy, and what kind of space do you think you can help create for smaller scale renewable energy like rooftop solar?
Right. Rooftop solar is one of several aspects that need to be pursued, and we should do all of these things simultaneously. Mm-hmm. There's nothing mutually exclusive about it. The PUC's decision is one I don't agree with, but at the same time, their hand was forced. The legislation that was passed and signed by Governor Sandoval dictated what they were to do. So this three-person panel that's presented as being independent was given a set of rules that they had to conform to, and then the result was a foregone conclusion. And then the legislators that pushed for this very measure stood back and clucked their tongues as they did the thing that they were compelled to do. So the whole thing is a disaster. And it seems, in my opinion, to be a clear nod, a pledge of fealty to big energy. And it's a mistake. But we can address that mistake at a federal level. We already give billions of dollars in subsidies to Berkshire Hathaway and other major energy concerns.
Berkshire Hathaway, which now basically runs NV Energy.
Yeah, they're the parent company of NV Energy. So there's nothing stopping us from dictating where those benefits go, or even, if necessary, adding additional benefits if we can direct them exclusively to things like rooftop solar and residential wind. There's no reason why we can't have most, if not all, of the homes energy independent. Residential energy consumes 14% of our nation's total power bill, right? So Berkshire Hathaway, that wholly owns NV Energy, Berkshire Hathaway is a publicly traded corporation. You can go online and look at their financials, and I recommend you do. They're doing fantastic, right? So even if every home went solar and wind and was energy neutral or even energy positive, the 86% of many billions of dollars in profit is still billions of dollars in profit. This is a trivial trespass upon their vast fortunes that they can and will afford, in my opinion. But to add to that, the utilities can do larger scale solutions. We're doing a pretty good job with that. I have my reservations and my concerns about the way NV Energy does things, and we've had a number of power failures around here lately that certainly speak to that. But they are doing a good job in the course of doing renewables out at a scale. Better than a lot of other states, and we're ahead of schedule to get to our renewable destinations. But we can still even do better than that. We've got wind, we've got almost as much sun as any other state in the nation, more than most. And geothermal is popping up very well. Geothermal is not a solution that's available to every state, so it's nice that that's one of the things that we have. I'm also a big fan of nuclear done correctly. We have thousands of tons of radioactive waste that's headed to Yucca Mountain and various other places, and it's going to poison our planet for 100,000 years if we don't take care of it. But there's a solution that's already been around for a half century. We built a liquid fluoride thorium reactor. Oak Ridge National Laboratories built it in the 1960s. They ran that thing for 5 years, and then Nixon shut it down to go build the light water reactors that we know today because they produced the fissile material to make weapons. So those reactors don't make nuclear waste. They actually consume it. So we can take those tons of waste that we have sitting in Yucca that's going to be a pollution and poison for generations to come and actually use it to create green energy. But that's something that has to be done at a federal level. We can't do that at a local or state.
Now, since you mentioned Yucca, so do you support the plan to ship radioactive waste, new radioactive waste, to Yucca Mountain?
I would be interested in considering that if we're interested in considering lifters, because at that point it becomes an input. You know, if the world wants to provide us free energy and the source material to power our reactors, then yeah, let's talk about it. I realize that wind and solar are more attractive in that they don't have this boogeyman. You think about Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island.
And there have been concerns, particularly in southern Nevada, over the safety of transporting nuclear waste to an active fault line.
Exactly. So, but again, if we're using it as an input to something that's going to consume it and take something that was a poison for 100,000 years and turn it into, at worst case scenario, it reduces it to something like 98% or by 98% and reduces its risk from 100,000 years to 350. That's a huge improvement over what we have. So even in the future, when we go to the hydrogen fusion reactors like what Lockheed's got, those will be the long-term solutions, but we still have to get rid of this waste. So we either sit on it for 100,000 years or we put it to use somewhere. And there are safe ways to transport things. We've transported things for years. We're good at it. At least when we let the EPA step in and make sure that the rails aren't going off.
Well, although it looks like one of his final parting gifts, Senator Reid, is trying to make sure Yucca Mountain never opens as a nuclear repository.
I understand, and I can appreciate the reservations. And if we don't have a solution for where it goes, then it is something that causes me consternation as well. But if we're going to do large-scale solutions that are green and sustainable, that include clean nuclear, then we have a mechanism to get rid of these things. In the meantime, solar and wind can be done at a residential and a municipal level, and really should be. There's a lot of rooftops out here, and I don't see enough solar panels.
Now, moving on to another big environmental issue here. Even though it looks like a Sierra snowpack is finally at about the historical average, that's still not enough to make up for even just the past 5 years of drought, particularly here in northern Nevada. What do you think the region needs to do in order to deal with this drought? And what do you think you can potentially do at the federal level, should you be elected to Congress, to aid in managing our limited water resources?
The droughts that we're experiencing are largely the result of climate change. Mm-hmm. Climate change is something we need to address as not just even at a national level, but at planet-wide. So as we pursue green power and clean initiatives, we stop harming the planet and it begins to heal itself. Mm-hmm. So once we can start leaving the oil in the ground, we also stop exerting influence overseas, then we win there as well. So this is a positive feedback loop that starts with we focus on the environment, we focus on energy independence, and the droughts begin to take care of themselves. We cause these problems, we can solve these problems. So at a local level, I would like to see urban farming. I want to see silos of concrete and glass filled with rocks and drip irrigation, churning out ripe fruits and vegetables that are ready to be delivered locally when they're ripe, instead of picked early, sprayed with something, and then shipped on a truck to spew diesel fumes for hundreds or thousands of miles. I appreciate that farming is essential to us, but the way we've done farming can't continue. The Ogallala aquifer in the Midwest is depleting every day. And when it goes dry, the Dust Bowl you know about from your history books is going to be something you would look forward to compared to what we're coming up against. Mm-hmm. And because we don't farm well, we waste a lot of water, and we use a lot of chemicals, a lot of petrochemicals in the forms of pesticides, herbicides, and nutritional supplements for the plant life. So we can get away from those things as we grow things in a more intelligent way. And we can grow whatever we want. Create whatever environment you like inside these. And you want to grow coffee or bananas or whatever that used to be in places that you'd have to go elsewhere to get, you can change the conditions inside these urban farming silos and make whatever you want viable. And then pick it when it's ripe and deliver it straight to the people who are going to consume it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we have
so I guess finally, should he be elected to Congress, what's the first bill you'd like to pass?
As I stated on my website, the first thing I wanted to pass was a poison pill legislation called Get to Work, which just makes every congressperson accountable so that if the government shuts down, they're not reelectable. They simply disallow re-election. I appreciate that there are some legal ramifications that make it.
Would that pass constitutional muster?
It probably wouldn't. In all fairness, it likely would. And more to the point, it even could play to the big money interests that are running things because they're happy to cycle in a new unknown face. They throw enough money behind it and it becomes a popular notion. So I appreciate that there's likely not much room for that to go forward legitimately or directly, but the sentiment is there. That's very much where I would like to see things go, is the idea of being held accountable for the simple act of keeping your job running, keeping the doors open. There's no excuse for shutting down the government, ever. It's unacceptable. And for you to use that as a tactic to then force the hands of others to do your will, it's bullying at a national level.
Yeah, would you say Senator Dean Heller has pushed his version of this, no budget, no pay, with wrong intentions?
I don't know that it's wrong intentions, but it certainly hasn't gone anywhere. So long as nothing happens, then I'm not going to put a lot of credence in or thought into what was said. Once it gets to a vote, then we'll start caring about it. But I don't suspect there's any intent of it going anywhere. I believe that they draft these dramatic bits of legislation knowing that they'll never get out of committee or any kind of legitimate vote so that they can go back to their constituents and go, look, I tried. When in fact there was nothing there.